Welcome, folks. Today's story is The Trucker No One Wanted to Hear. First, let's listen to the trailer.
For nearly 30 years, Frank Miller made his living behind the wheel of a truck. Then a new CEO began demanding faster deliveries, tighter schedules, and fewer delays, no matter the risk. Drivers were pushed harder. Maintenance was postponed, and one terrible accident nearly cost Frank's longtime coworker his life. Frank knew what was happening, but to the executives above him, he was just another aging truck driver with no seat at the table. To stop it, Frank would have to prove that the company's race for speed was destroying more than lives, and risk everything he had spent decades building.
That was just a glimpse of what Frank was facing. Sometimes, the people closest to the problem are the ones nobody wants to hear. Now, let's go back to where it all began. Let's start our story.
Frank Miller had spent 29 years behind the wheel of a truck, long enough to recognize when a company was asking too much from the people who kept it moving. At 52, Frank still liked the road. He liked the quiet before sunrise, the steady rhythm of tires on asphalt, and the satisfaction of delivering a load safely and on time. He was not the fastest driver in the company, but he was one of the most reliable. His record had been nearly spotless for decades. That changed after Daniel Cross became the new CEO of Northway Freight. Cross arrived promising the owner of the company faster deliveries, more contracts, and higher profits. Within weeks, dispatchers were given new targets. Routes that had once allowed time for weather, traffic, fuel stops, and rest were shortened. Maintenance delays became common because every truck sitting in a shop was considered lost revenue. Frank noticed the change immediately. Drivers began skipping meals. Some slept less than they should. Others stopped reporting small mechanical problems because they feared losing profitable routes. The official schedules still looked legal on paper, but everyone on the road knew how much pressure existed between the numbers. Frank reported several concerns through the proper channels. He documented worn tires, delayed brake inspections, and delivery windows that left almost no margin for safe driving. His complaints moved upward and disappeared. Inside the company, Frank slowly became known as the older driver who resisted change. He refused to see himself that way. Frank was not afraid of hard work. He had spent most of his life working nights, weekends, holidays, and storms. What bothered him was being asked to pretend that danger was efficiency. Then one of the company's most experienced drivers, Mike Lawson, was assigned a difficult overnight route after already completing a demanding week. His truck had also been waiting for a suspension repair that had been postponed twice. Mike accepted the load. Before sunrise, his truck left the highway. The crash nearly killed him. He suffered multiple serious injuries and spent days in critical condition. The company described the accident as driver error. Frank could not accept that explanation. He had seen the maintenance reports. He had seen the route. He knew the pressure Mike had been under. For months, Frank had warned that something like this could happen. For the first time in his career, Frank stopped thinking only like a driver. He began collecting information. At first, he did it badly. He filled notebooks with delivery times, fuel receipts, maintenance dates, overtime hours, and names of drivers who had resigned. He saved printed route schedules and compared them with older ones. His notes were useful to him, but almost impossible for anyone else to understand. When he tried to raise the issue again, management dismissed his conclusions as opinions. That failure bothered him more than the rejection itself. Frank realized that knowing the road was not enough. If he wanted people in offices to listen, he had to speak their language. After long shifts, he began studying the company's numbers. He learned how to compare maintenance costs, turnover, accident claims, missed deliveries, fuel consumption, and overtime. A supervisor in the maintenance department quietly helped him understand repair records. A mid-level operations manager showed him how certain route costs were calculated. A pattern emerged. The new delivery policies were not making Northway Freight more efficient. They were making it more expensive. Emergency repairs had increased. Experienced drivers were leaving. Insurance costs were rising. Trucks were breaking down more often because preventive maintenance was being delayed. Customers were receiving some loads faster, but other shipments were arriving late because equipment and drivers were being pushed too hard. Frank reorganized everything. Months of messy notes became a simple argument supported by numbers. Safer schedules, better maintenance, and realistic delivery windows would not only reduce accidents, they could increase profit. But by then, the CEO had heard about him. Frank began receiving fewer preferred routes. He was written up for minor issues that had previously been ignored. Managers stopped sharing information with him. He understood the message. At 52, with retirement finally visible in the distance, Frank was risking the security he had spent nearly 3 decades building. He continued anyway. When he finally presented his findings to senior management, Daniel Cross reacted quickly. Frank was removed from active routes while the company reviewed his conduct. Some of the internal information he had been using suddenly became unavailable. The investigation turned toward Frank instead of the policies he had questioned. For several days, he believed he had lost. Then the company offered him a quiet exit. He could leave without a public fight and protect part of his benefits. It was the safest option available. Frank refused. He had already learned what silence could cost. Instead, he prepared one final version of his findings and found a way to send them directly to Richard Hale, the owner of Northway Freight. Hale had built the company years earlier, but no longer managed its daily operations. He had hired Cross because he wanted a professional executive to modernize the business. Most of what he knew about current performance came through reports prepared by the leadership team. Frank's documents showed a different company. Hale reviewed the accident trends, maintenance costs, driver turnover, insurance expenses, and failed deliveries. He also reviewed Frank's earlier safety complaints and discovered how often they had been ignored. For the first time, the owner understood that the short-term numbers he had celebrated were hiding long-term damage. He ordered a deeper internal review. The results confirmed Frank's work. The pressure for faster deliveries had come directly from the CEO. Safety warnings had repeatedly been minimized. Maintenance had been delayed to keep more trucks available. Some operational reports had presented improvements without fully accounting for the costs created elsewhere. Daniel Cross was dismissed. Frank expected nothing more than the chance to return to driving. Instead, Hale gave him responsibility for fleet operations. It was not a symbolic promotion. Frank now had to manage hundreds of trucks, maintenance schedules, route reliability, and drivers who had known him for years. He made mistakes. He learned to read budgets, manage teams, and make decisions that affected people far beyond a single route. But he also brought something many executives lacked. He understood exactly what a bad policy felt like at 2 a.m. on an interstate. Under Frank's fleet management, preventive maintenance improved, breakdowns fell, driver turnover declined, delivery schedules became more realistic, and profits increased. Northway Freight lost fewer loads, paid less for emergency repairs, and kept experienced drivers longer. Customers began seeing more consistent deliveries instead of occasional bursts of speed, followed by failures. Hale kept giving Frank more responsibility. Fleet manager became director of operations. Operations led to strategic planning. Frank learned finance, contracts, hiring, and expansion. Each promotion forced him to grow beyond what he already knew. Years later, when Northway Freight needed a new chief executive, Hale did not look outside the company. Frank Miller became CEO. One morning, during an operations review, a driver reported that a newly planned route could not be completed safely within the proposed time. Years earlier, that driver might have been ignored. Under Frank, the route was changed before the truck left the yard. Frank had spent most of his life believing that experience should matter. Now he ran the company that had once refused to listen to his. Becoming CEO was not the victory that mattered most. The real victory was building a company where the next Frank Miller would not have to risk everything just to be heard.
And that brings Frank's story to an end. Sometimes real change begins when someone refuses to stay silent. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed the story, please like the video and subscribe for more underdog stories. Until next time, take care.